Namco was mostly known for its cutesy mascot characters like Pac-Man and Dig Dug, but in 1988 they released Splatterhouse in the arcades, a gruesome beat-em-up with an emphasis on gore, gore, and gore. The game was later ported to home consoles on the PC Engine in Japan and the TurboGrafx 16 in the US. Apart from the usual graphical and sound downgrades that typically go with a home-ported arcade game, a lot of content was cut, mostly in the US version. Not only was the gore toned down, but things like weapons being replaced and religious iconography, to even a middle finger flipping severed hand being removed. The uncensored arcade version was never released in the US until much later with the 2010 game, but we'll get into that much later. In Splatterhouse, you play as Rick Taylor, who, while out with his girlfriend, got caught in a horrible storm. Upon taking refuge in a nearby mansion, Rick is killed and his girlfriend, Jennifer, is taken. Rick awakens in a dungeon with the Terror Mask, an ancient MacGuffin which makes Rick super beefy and gives him the ability to punch knives. If you have some familiarity with Splatterhouse, you may be wondering why Rick's mask is red when in all other variants it's white. Well, Rick's design is obviously inspired by Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, so much so that Namco feared being sued and changed it for the American release, with the mask now looking like the ones from Super Mario Bros. 2 that chase you. The mask is restored to white in later games, but it looks a lot less like a hockey mask and more like a skull. Now that we are in the game whacking monsters, what is there to this game? Well, not a lot unfortunately. You move from right to left, smacking anything in your path. You have a punch, a crowd kick, and an awkward slide. You can smash that punch button as fast as you like and do your best Kenshiro impression. You're also able to push up on the D-pad and get a look at Rick's sexy butt. The only reason to do this is to grab items in the background, otherwise it looks like you're pissing. Splatterhouse is most definitely a style over substance game, but its style is incredible. The backgrounds in this game are greatly detailed and dynamic. There is always something moving or wriggling around in the background. Smashing monsters against the wall with a bat and watching them explode on the wall behind you is incredibly satisfying. And while enemies don't have that much variety in terms of how they attack, their gruesome designs will keep your interest throughout the game. I mean, look at this thing, what is it? At the end of each stage you have an encounter with a boss, and each of them are really cool. You have killer leeches that burst out of a pile of organs, a man with chainsaws for arms because one was not enough I guess, and my favourite is this pumpkin guy. The fight really isn't that interesting, he just flies around and you punch him, but this fight does look pretty silly. I mean, look at these zombies he sends at you, they look so goofy, I love them. They all look so happy to be dead. The difficulty does ramp up super hard by the end of the game, with many bosses taking ludicrous amounts of punishment before they go down. This makes the level become a memory test as you remember where enemies come from and you punch them before they get too close, as you only have a few hits per life and there are no health pickups. There are weapons you can find in the stage that make kills more gruesome, so I would recommend getting those for the bosses. At the time nothing was like Splatterhouse, it was an incredibly violent and explicit game for its time. While this doesn't necessarily make it better than other games, it does give it its own identity. For context, Ghouls and Ghosts was released the same year as this, and so Splatterhouse succeeds in what it was trying to do, emulate the slasher movies of the 80s. The best way I can sum up the attitude of the game is by reading the warning that was on the front of the box. The horrifying theme of this game may be inappropriate for children. And cowards.